everybody, and welcome back to another episode of JaAR. JaAR, for those of you that may be new, stands for Joe.
And Amy.
Review. And this is our weekly show, I guess now twice weekly, but only for this week. Our weekly show where we review the Magic stories. Today we are here for a bonus episode. If you missed our last episode, we encourage you to watch that one first, because we have begun reviewing the Kaldheim stories here for Magic the Gathering. And we did the first two mainline stories in the last episode / the first episode of this series. And today we are here for a bonus episode, because usually JARs come out on Thursdays, and today is Saturday, at least when you're watching this video. It is Saturday. So it is a bonus episode because they dropped 4 stories on us in a week, basically.
Yeah.
So we decided that we would not try to rush through 3 of them at once or anything like that. Technically, it's 4 stories in 8 days. But anyway, I want to give credit where it's due, but at the same time, 4 stories in 8 days, it's a week. But yeah, so we wanted to review 2 stories in the first video, 2 stories in the second, in this bonus one. And then hopefully we will be back to 1 or 2 stories per video for the next coming JARs. So today, we are here for the first 2 of, they're not calling them side stories, they're calling them Nico's story, which I'm totally okay with.
Yeah.
So we have Nico's story, numbers 1 and 2, 2-parter story here. So these are both considered linked to one another, whereas the future ones of Nico's story presumably are their own thing, but still alongside, or are still part of Nico's story alongside the mainline story. But anyway.
But that's an assumption we're making, right? Or do we know that?
Well, this specifically said this is a 2-part story.
Right.
Next week, we will see whatever it happens to be. But don't forget, this Thursday's JAR will only focus on the next mainline story, because the that comes out on Thursday, and the side stories come out Friday. What?
Story 3.
Yeah. But today, we are here for Nico's story numbers 1 and 2. Number 1, called Know Which Way the Wind is Blowing, and number 2, called Aim Through the Target. Both of these stories by Setsu Uzume. So, my quick review at the top of these 2 stories is, I think they're both good. I think the second one is a lot better, personally. But I think, obviously, the first one is very important for context for the second. So you should read them both. In fact, yeah, I think you should read them both. I think they're very good. This is a quick review, right? So I enjoyed it, and I encourage you to go check them out. What are your thoughts?
Agreed.
Fair enough. It's a quick review, right? So, yes. We encourage you to go read these stories if you have not already. If you don't know where to find these stories, 2 things. First of all, we'll talk more about it later, but the stories are finally in the story tab, but also the top link in the description. But but you can check the story tab on Wizard's website, but it's a lot easier. Yeah, surprise, surprise. But it's a lot easier. The links are the top 2 links in the description down below. We encourage you to go read those stories, and then we would love it if you would come back here.
Right.
What I will say for at least the first one, and then again, if you have context of the first one, the second one's a lot easier to get through. But for the first one, my opinion, take some time with that one, because there's a lot of new information being thrown at you all at once. So it's not just like a casual, oh, I'll just sit and read and have fun. You gotta focus and pay attention. It's kind of a lot. So like I said, we still encourage you to read it, but just realize that it'll require a little bit more focus. You know, if you got a bunch of stuff going on in the background, you might not be able to focus in as much. But like I said, then feel free to come back here and join us. But for now, we will get into the full review itself. Don't forget, we don't review, or I mess that up occasionally, and it's super annoying. We review, we don't summarize. So if you want to know the story in its entirety, reading it is the best way for you to be able to do that. So, for the first story, I appreciated, actually out of both of these stories, I think it's just Setsu Uzume's writing, personally, but it seems like the symbolism in their writing is very strong.
Okay.
And I really appreciated it. Right off the bat, in story 1, we have Nico taking their chitinous armor from Theros and repurposing it as side pieces to the armor that they gain now that they're on Kaldheim, and using it kind of as a reminder of their past, but also as a way to leave it behind. And I just think that's very appropriate. You, especially for someone like Nico, who's kind of bucking destiny and trying to move away from the life that they had, but you still need to remember some of it because it gives you context for the rest of your life.
Right. And it's not really about running away from something. It's about evolving.
Correct. Right, and so you use what you have, but allow yourself to change as well.
Right.
So I loved that symbolism.
So it's making improvements as opposed to, well, I'm just going to throw this armor out, get this new armor, and, now I'm going to live my new life that's definitely realer than my other life was. No, it's I've made a choice in the things I want to do and the person I want to be, so I'm going to take all the pieces of who I was and who I can become and sort of mold those together to be the best new me.
Yeah. And again, for Nico's life and Nico's experience, that makes perfect sense. So really, really awesome. Super well done there. And again, a great way to start it off and kind of let you know, like, this is what's coming. This is the type of writing you should expect, but also this is the type of story that you should expect to read, is one of evolution, of change, but still partially referential back to where Nico came from. And so I really appreciated that. Something that I found interesting, and again, this will come up as a theme a couple of times in talking about these stories. We have not read the articles yet. I would love to do so at some point, but we have not yet read the Planeswalker's Guide to Kaldheim articles that are at least 2 parts as of the recording of this video. That we have not read that as of yet. And so maybe this describes it in there, but this story mentions the fact that there is no sun or moon on Kaldheim. Which I found interesting. I don't know how they get light. I don't remember. So that was the kind of thing where
lights, I guess.
That was where I kind of was.
Yeah, there were some parts of this first story that were a bit hard to follow.
Right, and we'll get to that. I've got a lot of things written down for that, but I
didn't think the second story was like that, though.
I agree wholeheartedly. There was like a moment or two, and I wrote that down as well.
Okay.
But I agree. I don't think the second story was as difficult to follow in parts as the first one was. But that, again, I'm putting it out there. I want everybody to be aware. We have not read the Planeswalker's Guide articles yet. Again, we will hopefully be able to do that, and hopefully be able to do a JaAR of it after all the regular stories are over, but
yeah, maybe that would provide some context for this.
Maybe. And if that was something that was required, it was not something that we were told was required,
right.
So, I'd like to know that, I guess, but it was a little frustrating, because it's like, what do you mean there's no sun or moon on Kaldheim? How does that make any sense? I'd love to know more about that. That was like a throwaway line. So if it's in the Planeswalker's Guide, we'll get there. But that was the kind of moment where I was like, that's just going to be told with no context whatsoever? Okay, no problem.
Sure.
I wrote down a quote, or you asked me to write down a quote, talking about Birgi, when Birgi was first seen in the tavern area that they were in. Braids lustrous in the firelight, and her bright amethyst eyes like twin stars set in the shadow of her silhouette.
Yeah, I just loved that description.
Same.
I thought it was incredible, on top of it just being like, that's how you describe someone you're in love with. Like, it's it's like, it's like when you see in movies, like someone that you have a crush on, like their hair is all like wind blown, and there's like a light around their face or whatever. Mm-hmm. It's like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's fair.
But it's like a way of writing that actually sounds amazingly beautiful, as opposed to like how I just said it, which is terrible.
Please, you were fine. I think it makes sense, because we then find out, or we then learn later, that Birgi, who is being discussed, is a goddess. And that was confusing as hell to me, because maybe I missed it when we first met Birgi, but did they always know Birgi was a goddess? Did Birgi reveal herself to be a goddess, similar to how Alrun did it in the mainline story? I was super confused. But when Nico in story 2 is talking to the Valkyries, Nico mentions Birgi to the Valkyries as if they should understand that Birgi is a goddess. But if that's the case, then when Birgi introduces themselves as Birgi in the tavern, shouldn't the people also know Birgi to be a goddess? So that Alrun changed their name, right? When they were hiding, they were Ozzy or whatever. And here it was just Birgi, and it was always Birgi. So did they always know Birgi was a goddess? Because Birgi was just in a tavern, like, telling stories to people. So did they always know? I was just very confused by that personally. And as always, if that's something where you're like, yeah, Joe, just go read it again, you'll get it. That's fine. But to me, it was a little confusing. And if you felt the same way, let us know. If you didn't, again, maybe it was us. Who knows? But that was something that
I just kind of got an impression, I guess, that, like, they were sort of on more familiar terms with her. Like, it was common for her to just spend time with them.
Maybe. Yeah. The other thing was, and again,
you know, well, palsy-walsy with your god. Why not?
Yeah. Well, and that was kind of a point that Nico made, was like, the gods just come down here and hang out with people? Because Nico's from Theros, right? The Theros gods are kind of a big deal. That. Yeah, they don't do that at all. They meddle in mortals' lives only to mess them up, it seems, you know?
Essentially, yeah.
And at least that's what...
They're not benevolent gods by any means.
Right, and at least that's what, you know, people who get messed with, that's how they feel, so...
Yeah.
But, yeah, I was writing, like, it's just... Again, I'll reiterate the Planeswalker's Guide thing. Like, things like the Kana and the Omen Seekers. Are they, like, combating one another? Are they friendly? Are they neutral? I was unsure. And they are different groups, that's obvious, but the Kana are like the bear warriors, and the Omen Seekers are like the seafaring people. At least it seems that way. And like, but if that's the case, then like, why, when Nico's walking with Birgi and having a conversation, why did they like that? Why did that conversation lead to those two groups fighting each other? Like, is it like that? It's like a tentative peace between the two. Again, if that's a Planeswalker's Guide thing, right? But if that's a Planeswalker's Guide thing, great. Otherwise, I had no idea what was happening, and it was super frustrating because it's like, do I have to go back and read this again? What am I missing? Where am I missing this information? And I felt left out. And then at that point, for the rest of the story, I'm like, why is it happening? Why are they fighting? Now there's Valkyries here. Who's gonna die? It was like a lot of it kind of piled on top of one another, and it just was very confusing. I just kind of feel
like that anytime there's fighting.
Well, that's not...
Like, what's the point of this?
Well, that's a very different story.
That's a whole nother thing.
Yes, but no, but I mean, I don't know. It was very strange to me. Like, why? I just didn't... that part was confusing. Then, as would be the situation on a new plane, there are a lot of names.
Yeah.
Whether they're people names, places names, organization names, there were a lot of them. Mm-hmm. And so, being new to Kaldheim, like, I referenced the fact that in the mainline stories, Kaya was the stand-in for the audience. Now, based on how these stories were written, I get that there probably wasn't a lot of time for that in these stories because there's a lot to do.
Right.
But I felt like Nico easily could have been the stand-in for the audience here as a brand new person to Kaldheim. And it seemed like Chell was kind of doing that, but almost off screen, so to speak. That like Nico understood a lot about Kaldheim thanks to Chell.
Okay.
But we don't see a lot of that.
Right.
We just hear all these things, and it feels like there's context that we're supposed to have. Now, these are the replacement for side stories. right? Nico's story is what side stories were. And when we had the side stories on Ravnica, there wasn't as much explanation because people were familiar with Ravnica. At least it was probably assumed that they were. And our bias is we knew a fair bit about Ravnica. And stuff that we didn't know, we were like, oh, I guess that's something new. But it was like one or two new bits of information for a plane that we already knew a fair bit about. Whereas this is a brand new plane that we've never been to before.
Right.
So everything is new information. So it just piles it on, piles it on, piles it on, piles it on. And for a side story, it makes sense that, I guess, that you're not describing the world so in depth, but having something like, I mean, this is a discussion that was definitely going on online. This is not a new thing that we're bringing up here, but like having an art book where you can look at the settings and see what kinds of conflicts there are between different groups, or again, tentative piece, actual piece, who knows? Was it Beergees messing with the two groups that made them fight, or is that just something they would do normally? It was like, again, very confusing and frustrating in its confusion because I want to be able to enjoy these a lot more. And the whole time I'm going, but I don't even know what happened 5 minutes ago, and now you're referencing it again. How am I supposed to keep track of all this? And you're just piling on this knowledge that it seems like I'm supposed to have, but I don't. And so I felt like an idiot. Like, it was just like,
yeah.
That part was frustrating to me, personally. And again, if you feel differently, I would love to hear it. Because again, if that's something where it's like, read the Planeswalker's Guide and then come read this story. But also, side story number 1, part 2 of the Planeswalker's Guide, to my knowledge, hadn't even come out yet.
Right.
So anything that was in that, you wouldn't have had context for it for the side story. And please don't misunderstand. Setsu Uzume, at no fault whatsoever in this discussion, Setsu Uzume didn't write the Planeswalker's Guide and it wasn't their job to put, hey, go read the Planeswalker's Guide first at the top here.
Right.
That's for the Wizards employees to compile that information together.
Know.
That's right.
Yeah,
That's
let people know, like, look, if you want enough context to be able to read this story and understand what the heck they're talking about, you got to read the Planeswalker Guide first. And I think people who care about the story would be like, okay, I'll read the Planeswalker Guide first. But if they don't know to do that, then how is that helpful?
And that's an easy line, italicized, that you can put at the top, like, we recommend that you read the Planeswalker's Guide first, link here, right? And just have that link right there, ready to go. It just makes sense to me. Like, it's frustrating that there was so much information that was missed. Now, then the first story ends with Nico taking an omen path to Starnheim, which is the afterlife area. And so then we get into story number 2, which, like I said, my opinion was much better because I didn't feel like an idiot while I was reading it. In fact, I was able to sit back and actually enjoy it.
Yeah.
And enjoy it I did. It was very good. We talk about, you and I can talk about, you asked me to write down that the barrier between worlds, between Starnheim and where Nico started out in mainline Kaladesh, or the main area of Kaladesh, they described it as a skin between worlds.
Yeah.
And I know you want to talk about that.
I loved that line because when people talk about that, they usually call it a doorway or even a veil. Calling it a skin was very interesting for me. Because I feel like it created a very different mood than calling it a doorway or a tear or a veil, which is what you normally hear when referencing something of that nature. Calling it a skin for me was really cool because it was like, oh, okay. It gives it this whole depth, this whole understanding that it's alive, that it's real, that it's it has its moments of being thick and its moments of being thin, right?
Mm-hmm.
It, like, I feel like there's just so much, like, analysis that could go into the reason why that word was chosen.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, like, that's what's really cool about it.
Yeah.
Because, you know, when you hear any of those other much more commonly heard words for it, there's no analysis that you have to do.
Mm-hmm.
But this, just, I was just like, whoa, okay.
Mm-hmm.
It just gives you so much to think about going forward.
Yeah.
Yeah, just like it makes you think that, like, there's so much more to it than the credit that it's given.
Yeah.
Maybe.
And but again, that's further evidence of how good Setsu Uzume is in writing this, that one word choice, right? If it was the veil between worlds, we'd be like, okay, we get it, we know what it means. The skin between worlds, the way that changes your perception of what's occurring. Like, you're still fully understanding, like, okay, it's the barrier, right? It's the veil, it's the doorway, it's whatever, but it's the skin. So it gives you that much more of a background. I like that a lot.
It has a temperature.
Yeah.
It has feeling. It has life. It has, like I said, different moments of thickness and thinness. It has a strength to it.
Yeah.
But it also has a frailty to it. You know, it just embodies so much more than these typical words that you would hear for it. And maybe that's because those typical words just aren't really given the amount of thought that they're supposed to be given. But because you hear them so often, you don't apply it.
Yeah.
But, you know, so maybe it's not even so much the word that was chosen as it was the fact that it was a word that you wouldn't expect.
Sure. So that's what perks your ear up, because you're like, oh, okay. And then makes you think about it that much more, allowing you to get to the analysis that we just...
But I feel like my reaction to it, you know, for me, was much more the word that was chosen than the fact that it was different. Sure,
that's fair. Then we get to the point where Nico kind of meets this group of revelers, right? These dead folks, right? Because that's where Nico is. And they're hanging out. They're like ribbing each other. That was kind of a great moment. I really appreciated that. You know, just like joking back and forth. And you loved, not that I didn't, but you like you actively laughed at the fact that Nico kind of inserts themselves into the conversation that these folks are having and just says, like, well, you know, that's not what your mother said, or whatever, like something like that, right?
It was your wife joke.
Yes, thank you. It was your wife, yeah. So good, where it's just like, you know, these people are laughing and joking around, and Nico gets to insert themselves in the conversation just by furthering a joke at the other person's expense, but not really, right? It's like just a thing. It's just words.
Well, your wife didn't like it so much last night, or whatever. You know.
Oh my God, so funny. So that type of a situation. Now, I'll say one, because again, I love this story a lot. I really did. One negative that I had about this one in particular, which may be, you know, just a flashback from the first story when we read it, but in this story, Nico meeting the revelers or seeing them from afar, Nico gives them like nicknames based on their appearance. Since Nico doesn't know their names, so Nico gives them nicknames based on their appearance. And so we have these nicknames. Then, through talking to them, when Nico actually goes up, they introduce themselves. And so then they give their names. But not all of them do. Or at least if they do, they give like their main name and then their like nickname because, you know, what was it, best name first? Is the rationale there that they kind of have nicknames inherent in Kaldheim. And so those are the types of names that they give themselves. So between the made-up name that Nico gives them, their actual name, and their, like, title. That's 3 different names that you're supposed to remember. They also mention kind of where they're from. So again, another moment of just, hey, welcome to a new place. We understand that it's difficult to understand, but also here's all these things. And you're just like, holy shit. What am I supposed to remember here? What am I not? And so a minute from now, when Nico is referencing which one is speaking, I had no idea whatsoever who was talking, who was saying what, none. And I'm sure that there was a lot of care that went into deciding and picking their personalities and fleshing them out as characters. I couldn't enjoy it because I had no idea. And again, maybe I'm just not able to read it carefully enough because we're reading through it to try to like get to this point to review it or whatever. But I prefer these to be a casual read, not like a studious thing that like we have to sit there and like I gotta write down notes of like, okay, the red bearded guy is now named this and he's from here, so that's also like his title is this, so that's also what they could call him, and he's from here. Okay, this person is also this and they're from, like, that's so much. And like I have no idea what I'm supposed to remember, so
you hate that kind of stuff.
I hate it. I would have had to go back and read it again, and I despise that.
You hate that kind of stuff because you're the type of person who usually doesn't have to write things down to remember it.
Yes.
I'm not that type of person. That's why I always ask you about stuff, because I don't remember anything.
Sure.
So for me, that's not as scary because for me, it is studious. For me, I'm like, okay, should I have like looked up more about Norse mythology before we read this story? God damn it. And I have nothing to say in this fucking video. You know, and you know, you're over here saying like, you're mad about having to write down people's names, you know? So it's just a very different experience, I think, for the two of us.
But that's really awesome. I like that is the dichotomy even here. Because like, again, if somebody leaves it in the comments, and you're still welcome to, but if somebody leaves it in the comments like, what are you talking about, Joe? Like, what the hell? Like, maybe you're like Amy, where you're like, no, it doesn't matter to me. Just go back 3 sentences and remind yourself who that person is. To me, I don't like that, and that's me personally. So
but I remember reading a story that was a Celtic style type story. So it reminded me of these a lot.
Okay.
And the beginning of the book was 3 or 4 pages of, this is the name of a character and a short description of that character.
Okay.
And the first 3 or 4 pages of the book are just a list of names with a little bit of a description of who these people are.
Okay.
And that book was annoying to read. Let me tell you. I didn't get very far because it was like, okay, every time I read a character's name, I had to go back and reference it. And like I said, there was so many characters that it was like impossible to remember that.
Yeah.
You know, and after a while of re-referencing it and re-referencing it and re-referencing it, you're going to start to remember it. But I couldn't get that far because there were so many characters, and you know, I'm trying to read a story and I didn't get to because I was just always going back to the beginning. So yeah, that's difficult.
Yeah.
That's difficult.
Yeah, so maybe that's a point of contention. I would love people's opinions. Is that something that bothers you? Is it something that doesn't bother you? Is it something you enjoy? I'd love to hear from you because I in no way am sitting here saying this was a problem with the story. I'm saying it's a problem that I had with the story. And I am not everyone, and I am not the authority on proper writing. It's just, for me, that was my review, right? That's what we're doing here. That's my review of the story, is that I got to that moment and I was like, okay, I don't know what I'm supposed to remember. And so when we get later on and these characters are talking, I don't know who's talking anymore. Because they had other names 2 paragraphs ago.
Right.
So I knew who they were then because I met them and I committed that to memory. Now I have to mentally do the gymnastics of when we're reading it.
So this person is actually this person who's also this person.
Right, and from this place. Mm-hmm. But not only that, but I also didn't know when they named themselves, I didn't know that Nico was then going to start calling them by their actual name. I mean, it makes perfect sense, don't get me wrong, but I was used to it being the flame-bearded one or whatever, and now it's something entirely different. So now I have to shift gears. It does make perfect
sense, because, if you were sitting at a distance from somebody and you formed in your own mind a nickname for them,
of course,
when thinking about them, and then you actually approached them and spoke to them, you wouldn't call them that nickname.
Correct.
You would ask them what their actual name is.
And that's what I'm saying. I understand the reasoning behind it. It's just that now I, as the reader, have to shift it because, and yet I felt like Nico called some people by their first names and some people by their titles. It was just, again, it was a lot. But back to the actual praise of the story, because again, very, very cool. We meet another cat. Oh, can we also talk for a second about the art? The art in Kaldheim is insane. Yes. No question. Very, very good. The art direction, people, again, I'm not the first person to do this, but shout outs to the art direction, shout outs to the artists. Amazing job. Yeah. It's gorgeous. These arts, this set, absolutely beautiful.
I love the color palette that they used, and ironically, it reminds me so much of Ixalan.
Okay.
Even though it's like a frozen tundra compared to a jungle.
Sure.
Rainforest. But the color palette is very similar. Yeah. And I love it a lot.
Yeah, it's absolutely beautiful. I think the Valkyries, any art having to do with any of the Valkyries so far that I've seen, gorgeous. Some of the most beautiful art I've ever seen in my entire life. Absolutely beautiful.
I mean, realistically, the art in this set is pretty above and beyond a lot of the Magic art that we've literally ever seen.
Yeah, it's insanely well done. Beautiful. I think maybe it has to do with the fact that there's so many depictions of rainbows and prisms of colors and things like that, and so that's so striking, but it's just done so well. It's just gorgeous. And so for these stories as well, these are very pretty stories in being able to be oh my god, look at this picture. And what made me think of it is the cat, right? Nico meets another cat. So Nico met a cat in the first story, which was an actual what we would consider a cat, right? A small cat. This, based on the art, not so much based on the description, but based on the art, this was a big cat. Yeah. This is not some kitty, right? This is a cat, though. Gorgeous, awesome. And the art is insane. The description, super well done. And the cat leads Nico from the revelers, right? The dead folks who are gathering together, to where the Valkyries are. And we then have a bit of a confrontational moment, but it's really softened, which I appreciated, by Nico sassing those Valkyries. Yeah. It was so good.
Okay.
It was awesome.
Whatever you want to do.
Yeah, amazing.
I don't know them.
And then we get to genuinely my favorite part of the whole story. And I realize now in writing my notes I wrote it down wrong. Coma is called the Cosmos Serpent. I wrote it as the World Serpent because that's the Norse side of things, not the Kaldheim side. So anyway, yes, the Cosmos Serpent. But the description of when Coma appears to the Valkyries, tearing through, cascading pieces of oh my god, it was some of the best writing. I wrote it down. Some of the best writing ever that I've ever read. It was incredible. Just the description, the word choice, I loved it. I was fully in for that description. I thought it was incredible.
I don't know, maybe you need to read again. Maybe I missed it.
Okay, I'll definitely read that again. I'll read that many more times. I loved it. It was...
I didn't have the reaction to it.
Okay, yeah, well, we'll read it together again after this, but I encourage you to, if you haven't read the story yet and you're not planning on it, go to story number 2. I'd say maybe 3/4 of the way down on Nico's story. Absolutely incredible. Some of my favorite writing I've seen in a long time. Truly. Very, very good. Just the description of the World Serpent coming through, or the Cosmos Serpent coming through into the realm of the Valkyries. a lot of this latter end of the story was very good as well. The description of the fight, right? You were talking about not really knowing a lot of what was going on, what goes on in fights, or like what the purpose of it is.
Yeah.
I still thought the descriptions of the fighting, of the spears going into coma and spreading out, and how they spread out, and the decisions that Nico was making, and the centripetal force, and all that other stuff, that was great. I appreciated that as well. I thought all that stuff towards the end was very good. But like I said, I highly encourage you to go back and read that description of Coma, the Cosmos Serpent, showing up on the Realm of the Valkyries. It was very, very good. And if you disagree, I would love to hear from you as well. Don't think that because I'm sitting here like drooling over it means that you don't get to say that you disagree with that. I would always love differing opinions, similar opinions. That's the whole point of the comment section and the the discussion that we're having in these videos.
Yeah, tell me how wrong I am too. Amy, what the fuck?
So I don't know. I didn't have much more to say about these stories at all, unless you did.
They're great.
Yes.
Confusing.
Yes.
But great.
And that's why I would love,
a lot.
Genuinely, I would love for people to tell me if I should come back and read these stories again once I've read the Planeswalker's Guide to give myself better context. Is that what I have to do? Because again, I'm going to read the Planeswalker's Guide regardless, and I guess maybe when I read the Planeswalker's Guide, if I start noticing things of like, oh, that was in the Nico story, then I'll go back and read the Nico stories again, at least the first one, to make myself feel like less of an idiot. I felt like it was a lot of information that was written as if I should have known it already, and I didn't. And so because of that, if you don't have the context and it's building off of that context, it's a very shaky platform that you're on. So I was confused there.
Maybe it's just their way of like trying to. I don't know. That could just be like a writing style thing too. I think of like, the only way you're gonna know this information is if we talk about this information. You know what I mean?
Sure. And again, like I said, I can understand not being able to waste time on the descriptions here because there's so much going on and the story needs to be told. So taking the time out to explain every little thing isn't going to work. And in fact, there was even a moment in story 1 where one of the characters says something to Nico, and Nico says, or it says Nico was about to ask what that thing was, and then was cut off from being able to do so. So, maybe that was a little referential on purpose. Maybe it was just a throwaway thing, but because I was so confused about the references, it spoke to me in that way.
Maybe they're just trying to get people like me to look stuff up.
Right, and if that's the case, that's fine. I don't mind doing research, but needing to know where to go for that research is a different thing entirely. Yeah. Do I go to the Planeswalker's Guide? Do I wait for an art book that's not coming? Where do I go to find out this information?
Right, because I'm just a surf the internet until you figure it out kind of person, and that takes a lot of time.
Yeah. So the last thing I wanted to bring up, just as a meta, side note thing, outside of the story, outside of the four corners of the story, this second story, side story number 2, came out, I guess, the day before this video comes out, on Friday. The side stories come out Fridays, the main stories come out Wednesdays, except the first one, which came out Thursday, because screw content creators, right? Anyway, it's not actually that, but it was frustrating, and we talked about that. It's not. But come week 2, or into week 2 with this, looking for Nico's original story prior to midday Friday, or later in the day on Friday, or into Saturday, was very frustrating. Because it was not on the story tab. The Zendikar Rising stories, when the side stories came out, they were on their own section. It was main story, side stories, right next to each other. You clicked on one, you clicked on the other. They were right there, available for you as they came out, one after another. So when there was only one side story, it was in the side stories tab. When there was only one main story, it was in the main stories tab. For this, we went to the story tab getting ready to read for this, and I was confused because this was earlier in the week for Thursday's JaAR. I was confused because I was like, oh, okay, I guess there are no side stories. There's just the two mainline stories. But I could have sworn that there was one that came out on Thursday as well. Did I read that wrong? And so I decided to look it up. And I had to go into the Daily MTG archive and scroll down past almost a week of articles, many articles, not all having to do with story, in fact very few having to do with story, to find Nico's story, which I then had to open as a tab. This is me personally, but I opened it as a new tab, and I had to leave that tab open on my computer until we were ready to read it because we were going to read it, right? But it wasn't there. So for all the people that are coming to check out your card previews and the card gallery, for all the people who are coming to read the mainline stories, up until Friday or Saturday, you didn't have those stories on your story tab. So there is no reason that anyone should have known that they existed. None whatsoever.
Yep.
And
aside from being told.
Right. And even then, even though we're told something, that doesn't mean it's gonna happen,
and
right?
If we can't find it, guess what? We ain't reading it.
Correct. Well, we would search for it.
Right.
But any of your non-content creator fans who are coming to look for your story, they will stop at the story tab because, surprise, surprise, that's where they're going to look for the story.
Shocking, right?
It's not that difficult of a concept, and yet they weren't there. Now they are. Credit where credit is due.
Thankfully.
It is now updated. But not for nothing, right? We're YouTube creators, right? We're video content creators. If a VOD doesn't go up for us, or a video doesn't go up for us at the scheduled time that we have set for ourselves, for what time it's supposed to be released, okay, maybe someone sends us a message like, hey, is that video coming out today? Okay, we're running a little late. Sorry, it's a 2-person operation, right? And we don't yet, and this is not a complaint, we don't make any money off of this. So
no.
There's no financial incentive to do it. We do it because we love it, right? That's why we're doing it.
So sometimes other things are more important.
Or things come up,
in
again.
a timely manner,
Sure.
Sure.
Or whatever it is. That's somewhat irrelevant. But for a multi-million-dollar company, releasing stories that are now that you've stopped doing ebooks again and realized that people don't want to pay for your stories, use your stories as advertisements and not as more of a money grab. If you're using your story as advertisements, do it correctly. Don't drop the ball for almost a week, over a week, and not share your stories with the people where they're going to be looking for your stories. Let's not even talk about the fact that they are stories focused around your first non-binary planeswalker that you said that you were giving consideration and time and care to, which, and I truly am not. That's the first
place my mind went.
It has to. But at the same time, I don't think it was malicious. Personally, I don't. This is me. But I'm also a straight white male, and so realize that is where it comes from. I don't believe it was malicious. I don't believe it was done intentionally to be like, well, let's not care enough to put these up there, or let's be slow about putting them up so that, people that are coming to look here, if they're only coming at the beginning, they're not going to see those because we're embarrassed by them or because we don't want the wrong people to see it. I don't think that's the case. I could be wrong, and be aware of my experiences and where I'm coming from in having that feeling. And if you feel differently, you are more than welcome to voice your opinion. We would love to hear from you. There's no way that that's not how it's going to be perceived, whether it was your intention or not, because you just made a point of literally having to say that we don't care if people have a problem with telling these kinds of stories. We want to tell them.
Right.
Well, that's great, but show don't tell, friends.
Right.
And by hiding that story away under a week's worth of articles before actually putting it up on your website is a pretty shitty way of saying that you care enough.
Right. It's an indicator of something.
Yes. And
but the other side of that same coin, I feel like, is, well, if the tabs used to say story and side story, maybe someone said, well, wait a minute, how come Nico's stories are the side stories? Maybe that tab shouldn't be there, or maybe that tab shouldn't say that. And maybe they needed that period of time to figure out how they were going to put the stories back, to figure out how to put the Nico stories with the other stories, keeping them separate, but not saying, oh, this is a side story, this is tertiary. You know what I mean?
It's a good idea. I definitely don't buy it, but it's a good idea.
I'm just saying, like,
sure.
There are multiple theories that you could surmise for the issue there.
Yeah, definitely. I just, all I'm saying is, it's not a good look.
Right.
It's not. And it has been fixed. Again, it has been fixed. We're talking about this after the fact. It's been fixed. They're up. They're available. Go support them, right? The links are down in the description below. Share them, etc. But it was upsetting. Yeah. It was upsetting that I was second guessing the knowledge that I actually even had. Right. So, let alone folks who didn't have that knowledge at all.
Right.
So, when they went to go look for your main story, and there were 2 of your main stories up already, for days, 2 of your main stories were up already, and your side stories weren't even accessible through the avenue where they should have been accessible.
Right.
To me, that's arguably unacceptable. And it's fixed now. So, okay. I mean, you fixed it.
Which means you were capable of fixing it in the first place.
Correct.
And firstly.
Correct.
And second, you knew it was a problem, because then it wouldn't have needed to be fixed if it hadn't been. Maybe
they could play the global pandemic card. People are working from home. They're not able to update the website as easily, as readily. But it's also 2021. You can update a website. I could update a website from my phone. Like, you know what I mean? And like, if I have admin access to that website. So.
And the pandemic's been going on a while.
Sure. So you figured it out by now.
Yeah.
That's a fair point.
Have that part of their drop down.
Again, I would love people's opinions. Are we being too harsh? Are we not being harsh enough? We would love to hear from you down in the comments below. But also about the story. Because the stories were good, and I want to know if we need to take our time and read it again, if we need to pursue other avenues of resources to better understand the things that we were confused by, or if you were confused as well. And check the comments, because if you were confused as well, but there's good ideas down there for things that you could look up, maybe it'll help you as well as it'll help us.
Right.
But either way, more information is never a bad thing when we're all trying to show off our...
#Vorthos Pride.
That's right. It's worth it. Let's learn about this new plane genuinely, especially because of how good I felt side story number 2 was, or Nico's story number 2 was here. I'm super excited to see what happens next in the mainline story, but definitely in Nico's story next week. So don't forget, Thursday's JaAR will only be for main story number 3. That's all it will be for this week, because JaAR comes out on Thursday, story comes out on Friday. Kind of difficult to have them both. So that means the week after that, we will be back to 2 stories per video reviewed. Hopefully we will be able to do the Planeswalker's Guide to Kaldheim after all this is over as well. And that will maybe answer that question for us if someone in the comments has not already. But thank you so very much for watching this episode. We really do hope everybody enjoyed. I highly encourage you, over on Video Games for All. We had the VOD go up today as well of our stream from last night.
Check it out. It was a good one.
It was a very good one. We had a blast. It was a tough fights, but we got through them mostly. So we encourage you to watch that stuff if you have not seen our playthrough.
Really
yeah, if you've not seen our playthrough yet of Marvel's Avengers, you should check it out. You should, check out all the stuff over on Video Games for All this Tuesday. We've been announcing this a lot, but this Tuesday is the start of Amy's foray into Pokemon Silver for the first time ever, having completed Pokemon Red a little while ago. This Tuesday, January 19th, will be the release of the first episode of Pokemon Silver. We know that there are a lot of people in the community, in the Geek for All community, who are looking forward to it, so join in with your fellow viewers in watching that episode. Coming out this Tuesday, should be noon Eastern-ish. Just, stay tuned for it. Best way to find out exactly when that video comes out and be one of the first to see it is to subscribe to that channel and ring that bell so that you will get a notification as soon as that video goes up. You can do the same here, Gluten Free for all of our channels. We would really appreciate it. It helps us out a lot. The algorithm, being what it is, demands it. So we request it kindly.
Yes.
While we are, being snapped, our reins are being snapped by YouTube. So we'll just ask politely.
Yeah.
And
Check out those Dream Daddy videos, because what a great game.
Speaking of which, if you're watching this on Saturday, the day it comes out, new Dream Daddy video tomorrow. So definitely check it out. Great series, super fun. Thank you all for any and all support that you give us, whether you're live on our streams every Monday and Friday, 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern Time, right here on this channel, whether you're watching our video game updates on Video Games for All, checking for stuff on Gluten Free for All, watching stuff here on Geek for All. We have this week, with this bonus episode, 7 video uploads a week and 2 streams. That is 9 individual pieces of content this week. I'm exhausted.
Yes.
So
yes, he is. I'm okay. He does all the hard work. Anyway.
I was gonna say.
I just show up here.
He's a wuss, and I'm not. So thank you all sincerely. We really do hope that everybody enjoyed. We hope to see you on Thursday for the continuation of JaAR. We hope to see you on stream on Monday for what is likely to be Tinkerer's Cube on MTG Arena.
Yay!
So stay tuned for that. Thank you once again. And for now, from us here at the Geek for All family of channels, I have been Joe.
And I'm Amy.
And as we always say, in whichever video of ours you watch next, we will see you all next time. Thanks, everybody.